Hi, Grandma here, and I'm reading the final installment of Mr. Lincoln's Drummer. In the first part of the chapter, we find out that Willie is helping out in a hospital. He's helping nurse people, and we also have found that he has met up with a major in the Army who tells him that they are going to make a short journey, but we don't know what that short journey is. I'm beginning on page 124 in my edition. Now, the major escorted me to the bathing room. Somehow he had assembled a brand new uniform for me. Boots, too. I gazed in wonder at a real leather belt and spotless white leggings. A cap with a brass bugle in front lay atop a new tunic. "Get scrubbed," the major ordered, pointing to a waiting tub of steaming hot water. "I'll send a man to clip your hair, so see he shaves you as well." "Shaves me?" I asked, tensing. "Well, you got a whisker or two on your chin. That won't do." He left, and I shed my clothes. Then I climbed in the tub, soaped myself, and rinsed properly. I can't recall ever feeling so absolutely clean. I was halfway dressed when a young black man arrived. He insisted I sit on a stool and remain absolutely rigid. "You the barber?" I asked. "That's what they tell me," he said. "Mostly I clip hair for the undertakers. It's a real art making the dead presentable." "I'm not dead," I reminded him. "No, but by the time you get all prettied up, you'll look good enough to bury. Don't you worry. I shave myself every morning. I haven't cut my throat yet." "Just leave a whisker or two," I told him. "You leave everything to me, youngster. A man's first shave ought to be a first-class job. I'll do you justice." He mixed some shaving powder and hot water in his hands. Then he spread the lather across my chin and cheeks. He put an edge of the razor to my face and sliced away my chin hairs so quickly I hardly had time to notice. He then took out scissors and trimmed my hair. When he finished, I looked ready for Easter Sunday. He left and I continued dressing. I took great pains to make sure every button was fastened. I was reaching for the cap when the major reappeared. "Now that's what I call a soldier," he declared. "I'm only a drummer," I explained. "Lately, not even that." "I know all about you, Johnston," the major insisted. "Follow me. We have a train to catch." "Okay, now, what do you think is going to happen? We only have a couple more pages. Where do you think they're going? Do you think he's going home? Do you think they always get people all dressed up and shaved and bathed in a fresh uniform just to go home? I'm very curious as to what's going to happen. We rode to the station in grand style. The major had hired a cab, and we traveled the streets of Baltimore like a pair of princes. The major flashed a pass at the depot, and we were admitted to a first-class car. A waiter served us platters of roast beef and boiled potatoes, and I stuffed myself. I had to pass up a slice of chocolate cake for fear my trousers would split. I paid only scant attention to the countryside outside the window, but when we stopped, I recognized Washington right away. The major and I stepped off the train in the center of town, not far from the Capitol itself. It looked grand with its new dome, but I had little time to observe architecture. Once again, the major ordered a cab. The driver smiled at me as he poked his horse into a gallop. We raced along the dusty streets, and I worried that if the cab's wheel hit a rock, all my efforts to improve my appearance would have been for naught. Fortunately, we arrived without incident outside the War Department building. "I don't understand any of this," I said, refusing to climb the steps. "What am I doing here?" "Oh, you are seeing the Secretary Stanton," the major said, pulling me along. "He has something for you." As bewildered as ever, I stumbled up the steps and followed the major to a small room outside a larger reception room. I could see a handful of generals and finely dressed ladies inside. There were several distinguished men in tailored suits, too. I also recognized one of the war correspondents who had visited our camp in Virginia. "Wait there, Willie," the major said, pointing to a small sofa. I stepped over and sat down. I let out a long breath and shook my head. Then I felt a strong hand grasp my shoulder. "Hello, son." A faintly familiar voice called. I stiffened my shoulders and gazed up at Mr. Lincoln himself. He wore a friendly grin this time, and his eyes were not so tired as before. "Good afternoon, sir," I said, starting to rise. "Oh, no need, Willie," he told me. "Mind if I join you here?" "I'd be honored," I told him. "You seem to have lost your stammer," he observed. "That's for the best. I had one myself a long time back, but I was determined to be a lawyer. Works against a man stammering." "Yes, sir," I agreed. "I was a little nervous before." "Tired as well. Quite a thing holding on to your drum during that long withdrawal." "More a skedaddle than a withdrawal," I observed. "General McClellan wouldn't agree. He's after my job, you know. I imagine you will hold on to it, sir. You look the part. My own Willie told me that once. Trust us to know, sir." "He's left me now," Mr. Lincoln said, frowning. "We buried him better than a year ago now." "Was he a soldier then?" I asked. "No, just a little boy. I wouldn't allow him to join the army. He had a heart for it, but his health. He died of a fever here in Washington." "We've had a bad time with fevers in the army. I had a battle with one myself." "You have had your share of challenges, Willie. General Smith spoke well of you, and Secretary Stanton agrees that you exemplify the spirit of all our soldiers. You have served your country well, and the nation has decided to honor you." "Honor me?" I asked. "How?" "Why don't we go see?" the president suggested. "I think they are ready in there." I spied the major and rose when he waved me along. I entered the room with my cap on, and the major motioned for me to remove it. I did so, and one of the ladies grinned. The generals didn't. The onlookers filed in an aisle. I marched past them to where a large man with a peculiar stripe of gray in his hair waited. He read a short statement about the 7 days and told how I kept my drum when all the other drummers in General Smith's division failed to do so. He spoke a few words about my time in the hospital and congratulated me on my recovery. By virtue of the authority granted by the United States Congress, I now award drummer Willie Johnston of the 3rd Vermont Volunteers the Congressional Medal of Honor. "Shake Secretary Stanton's hand," the major whispered. I almost fainted. The Secretary of War himself clasped my hand. He then pinned a strip of ribbon holding a star-shaped pendant onto my tunic. "May all our citizens demonstrate the devotion shown by this young man," the secretary added. The generals applauded, and the ladies came forward to kiss my forehead and pinch my cheek. It was every bit as bad as if Ma had invited the neighbor ladies. Later, I tried to stand as tall and stiff as possible while a newspaper artist made it a sketch. The correspondents fired a volley of questions, but I hardly heard them. I was glancing around, hoping the president would reappear. "Has anyone seen Mr. Lincoln?" I finally asked. "Well, he has a country to run," one of the generals observed. "You shouldn't expect him to be here. I don't believe you're quite that important, son." I thought about telling him about the visit before the ceremony, but I knew better than to antagonize a general. I kept mum. Only when the major had us on the northbound train that night did I ask anyone about anything. "Why me?" I asked, fingering the medal. "I did nothing very brave. I never stole a rebel locomotive." "I don't know for certain, Willie," the major replied. "Maybe it had something to do with the president's son. You certainly touched his heart." I like to think that when the secretary pinned the medal on you today, he was honoring all the sons of all the fathers who have served the nation in this terrible ordeal. We can't recognize everyone, so we chose you as their representative. You should consider yourself very special, Willie. I do, sir, but I don't feel like I have a right to. I probably don't have a right to wear a major's uniform, Willie. I haven't led any charges or braved any bullets. I think a man has to serve where and how his country asks, though. I do, and so will you. And if my name had been Terry or Ben, well, somebody else might have received the medal, but then Ben didn't carry his drum to Harrison's Landing either, did he? No, sir, I admitted. You have a lot of years left to you, Willie. When you're older, you may come to understand how important it is for a country to have heroes, to honor courage and devotion. If we can't see those good things in the midst of so much death and suffering, we may be unable to continue this fight. I believe in courage and devotion, and I have witnessed both at West's. Glance around at the men's faces when you walk among them with that medal on your chest. If they tell you to send it back, do so. They won't, though. It was a strange thing. Aside from Pa and a few of my teachers, no grown man has ever spoken so many words aimed directly to my heart. I never even knew his name either. He was right about the men at the hospital, too. It's about time they recognized a real soldier, one of them declared. You make us proud, Willie. I didn't reply. Among the brotherhood of soldiers, some things were simply understood. I paraded through the ward one final time. Then I stripped off my tunic, draped an apron over my shirt, and went back to work. Okay, that's the end of the novel, but there is what's called an epilogue. An epilogue means something additional the author wants to say at the end of the book. When Willie Johnston received the Congressional Medal of Honor on September 16, 1863, he became the 7th soldier in the U.S. Army to be honored. He remains the youngest ever to qualify for this nation's highest military decoration, being not quite 12 when distinguishing himself during the 7 days. Willie remained at the U.S. General Hospital in Baltimore through January 1864. As a member of what was first called the Invalid Corps and later more appropriately renamed the Veteran Volunteers. At that time, he completed his 3-year enlistment and was mustered out of the Army. He then re-enlisted in the 3rd Vermont, was allowed a brief visit home to see his mother, and reported for duty with his old regiment in Virginia. He ended up serving the remainder of the war with the regimental brass band in Baltimore. Although some of the characters in this book are fictional, they represent the courage and self-sacrifice of all the Civil War soldiers, Northern and Southern alike. The soldiers of Company D, 3rd Vermont Infantry, portrayed in this novel are the actual men who lived and died in the dramatic struggle to preserve the Union and abolish slavery. I have relied on the compiled service records preserved in the U.S. National Archives, the records of the U.S. Census of 1860, and the revised roster of Vermont volunteers of the Civil War for details. Captain Fernando Harrington was discharged from the Army on July 23, 1862, under mysterious circumstances. Although his official report of the skirmish at Lee's Mill survives as the accepted account of 3rd Vermont's role in the fight, later versions provided by veteran soldiers after the war claim the captain remained well to the rear. Captain Sam Pingree was acknowledged as the hero of the hour. Erastus Buck eventually rose to the rank of captain. He died May 22, 1864, from wounds received leading Company 1. He left behind letters recently published in Buck's book, A View of the 3rd Vermont Infantry Regiment. The account serves as an important source of information on the regiment and its men. Pfeiffer artist Julian Scott himself received the Medal of Honor in recognition of his gallantry in rescuing wounded comrades at Lee's Mill. His sketches attracted great interest, and he was discharged from the Army and went to art school. His sketches and paintings of soldiers and war reflect an appreciation for the drama as well as the humor of Army life. One painting in particular, a depiction of drummer boys playing cards on a makeshift table, provides a glimpse of the Army's youngest soldiers. Sergeant Bill Currier later won promotion to first lieutenant. He survived the war. Horace Partlow's illness led to his discharge on November 14, 1862. Moses Torrance was likewise discharged due to illness on October 1862. Saloon Persons was captured at Savage's Station and later exchanged. In May 1864, he was wounded, but he recovered and returned home. Calvin Stebbins left the 3rd Vermont in October 1862 to join the cavalry. Calvin Stevens continued to suffer from sickness, but eventually won promotion to corporal. His younger brother Russell was killed in the 3rd Vermont's attack on Fort Stevens on July 12, 1864. The memory of Will Scott, the sleeping sentinel, is preserved by a monument erected near his home in Groton, Vermont. He is better remembered for his minor lapse on picket duty than for his sacrifice at Lee's Mill. So this book, although it's called historical fiction, was based on a lot of very real people and very real events. Maybe you will look more into people who have won the Medal of Honor, now that you have become acquainted with Willie, who is the youngest to get a Medal of Honor. Bye-bye.